Hi, my name's Jack Lynch and I'm a visual effects artist based in Manchester. In this video, I'm going to show you my workflow on how I created this 3D model of a junction box. I used photogrammetry techniques and mostly free software, so let's get started. When recreating a real-life object using photogrammetry, it's important to take lots of photos of your object. So as you can see here, I took lots of photos going round in concentric circles around this junction box. It's important to capture everything you want to recreate. So if you don't have photos of it, you are not going to have the geometry at the end, especially where detail is occluded by the object itself. I took 219 photos for this object, and I went close-up detail as well to get the detail on the lock and as well the detail on the floor where it meets the ground. This object was slightly blocked by this other junction box, so that's going to generate some issues on this side here. Ideally, you want plenty of room all the way around your object so you can get plenty of photos on each side. So I got more photos on the clear side here rather than the side that is blocked by this other box. So once you've taken your photos, you're going to need to download Meshroom. It's a free and open source piece of software specifically made for photogrammetry. It's node based, so each operation is a specific node with different parameters to change. The default options are very good. However, I've changed my texture size as well as to use UDIMs to get the maximum detail out of my raw scan. First thing we need to do is get our images and drag them into here. So it's going to analyze all the images and look at the metadata to find out what lens, what image sensor, and some other details about the photos. So once you've loaded in your photos, it's important that you save your project. You just need to click Start, and you get this big loading bar at the top, and it will process all your images, align them, generate a dense point cloud, then create a mesh out of that, and then project textures onto the mesh. Meshroom has finished calculating now, and it's found 318 out of 319 photos. And the photo that it didn't find was this photo here, which I'm fine with. It didn't have much detail anyway, and there's not really much key features for Meshroom to match with the other photographs. So your mesh will probably come in at a strange angle as well. Mine came in totally off, and what you'll have on by default is icons of all the cameras. So this is where each photo was taken in 3D space. So you can see I went round in circles, then got blocked off, and then went round here, and you see there's far more photos on this side as opposed to the side where I was blocked by the other box. So if you double click one of these, so meshing for example, you get this icon here which you can click and turn off the other one, and you can see the model was being reconstructed, and we have some errors over here. And if you want to view the filtering, which basically clears out lots of the artifacts and bigger mesh errors, that's here. It also smooths it as well. If you wanted to change any of the smoothing iterations, it's just here, and you can also keep the large triangles that are generated, so these ones here. And then we can apply our texturing. Because I clicked Use UDIM, it's going to generate as many UDIMs required at 8K to fulfill maximum quality. So in this case it generated 17 maps. We can view those maps by right clicking and opening the folder. That will open up a File Explorer window with the mesh and the 17 image maps. So you can see the UV unwrapping that Meshroom does is not very efficient at all. It's a lot of black space and doesn't use most of the UV map, which is why I wanted UDIMs and maximum quality at 8K. So let's bring this into Blender and start cleaning it up. I've got my fresh Blender scene here. I'm just going to import an OBJ, paste in the location, and because it has a material file as well, it should come linked with all the textures. This might take a while for Blender to open up and find all the textures because it does have quite a few UDIMs. Okay, so my mesh has been imported into Blender now, and you can see it is at this weird angle. It's upside down and rotated weirdly. Okay, so if we align that, I'm going to rotate it round so it at least faces up. Okay, so once it's lined up, you can put the floor in the origin, like around about there. And now let's have a look at our wireframe. It is so dense. So if we wanted to put this into a game engine like Unity with 3 million, almost 4 million faces, it would not work very well. And you see that our main subject has the most detail in, and then towards the background you see it's kind of, the details fading away. And now let's preview it with our textures. Okay, so it all looks good. So something you can do to preview it is put it into rendered mode, then change the sky to white, and that will basically put a uniform light everywhere. So an issue we're going to have with the textures is this side is somewhat occluded by this junction box here, and there was a tree area here. So this side is in shadow basically. And I think, yeah, the back is in shadow compared to where it's very well lit on the top here, where it's quite reflective, and here. So we're going to have to clean that up. So first thing we need to do is only select the geometry that we want. We don't want all this grass back here, and we don't even want the road here, or the pavement. So let's do that. So I'm going to jump into the select lasso, into edit mode, and it might take a while because there is almost 4 million polygons. And I'm going to go to X-ray mode and back into lasso. I'm going to select faces, and I'm going to select try that again, and I'm going to select just the junction box and a tiny bit around it. Okay, so I'm going to click Control I to invert the selection, and then X, and then delete faces. Okay, so we've got some floating geometry out here that we selected in our lasso selection. So what I'm going to do is go back to the tweak, grab one of these faces, then click Ctrl L, and that is going to select all linked, and we're going to link it by the seam. So that's going to get rid of anything floating. Ctrl I, X, delete faces. Okay, so we've got it down to 2.5 million polygons now, but that's still way too much. We need to fix this issue here. So I'm going to rename this to raw scan. Check our textures still work, they should do. Don't see why not. We haven't messed with our UVs. No. So, first of all, let's clean up this huge gap here. Okay, so jump into edit mode. I'm also going to delete these faces here because we're not going to need any of that grass and it is slowing us down. And this as well. It's just going to speed up the viewport performance quite a lot. So I'm going to actually duplicate this to kind of make a backup. And I'm going to rename it to scan cleanup 1. Now we can do a few things to fix this. We can have a look at sculpting. Let's see if we can fix it in sculpting. So I'm going to use the fill tool. If you drag this out, then you can actually see the names. I'm going to use the fill tool, turn off symmetry, and just by using the mouse, I'm going to fill this hole. Trying not to affect any of the other geometry. We can go to advanced and topology auto masking, and if we can find accumulate. Or maybe we try accumulate in here. This might help to start off with. Just by bringing it out, and then let's try the fill again. It's working slightly better now. Far too much, so I'm going to shift to smooth that. Just so we can get it kind of flat. Okay, so I've got this side cleaned up now, a little bit better than before. I just used the fill tool and the smooth tool and the clay tool as well. The fill tool isn't so good around the edges, but as you see, if we do it around the edges, it starts filling everything basically. So I found it works quite well on the center where it's not faced by any edges. And I'm just gonna use the clay strips to actually fill in detail. And this is where we have accumulate on. So if we add in some clay around here, then brush a bit bigger and smooth it out. And now we can go in and fill it with a bit of a bigger brush. Tried using flatten, but I don't really think that works very well in this case. Yeah, it does flatten out detail, but it's a bit bumpy. I found smooth actually flattens things out quite well. So we can go around and sculpt in some more detail if we want, which I think is what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead, clean up some of this noise, because this is not what it truly is like. So I'm just going to go ahead, flatten out some of this noise, smooth it out, just in there, just so we get it a tiny bit less noisy using this flatten tool. And okay, so now we've got our mesh smoothed out a little bit. We can begin to remodel this. Luckily it's quite a simple shape, so we will be able to remodel this very easily. So I'm going to go back into layout mode. I'm going to add a cube, resize it, and just like with modeling anything from scratch, just go ahead and line up all the verts. I'm going to shrink wrap it to our cleanup. See, we're getting some issues here. That is simply because of the limit. So if we make it 0, we're getting some weird things. Let's downsample that. Okay, I'm going to make a backup of this. So I'm going to Shift D, duplicate that. Not in edit mode though. Now we need to UV unwrap our object. So first thing I'm going to do is delete these bottom faces, because we're not going to see them. And now we can simply unwrap our object. So I've placed some cuts in the obvious areas. Now if we go to UV unwrapping and unwrap it, we still have some issues here. So let's simply cut this off. Now we have unwrapped our object, we can begin to project our textures onto it. So I'm going to shrink wrap it to our original scan, and then add some subdivisions. Before we actually bake, we need to set up a shader for our new object. So in the shading tab, click on our new box, new, and then we need to create a map for baking. So I'm going to create a new 8K map. I'm going to change the color to black with 100% alpha. Create that. I'm going to call it JBox Bake Color. Then we go from our scan, hold down Control, click on the clean box. Then under the rendering tab it is bake. Change it from diffuse, color only, selected to active. Change this to 0.01 and then bake. We have our textures projected now, and there have been some errors that we would need to fix. So we've got lots of black spots here, which I think we may be able to fix with our projection limit or array limit. Let's have a look now with the object with smooth shading on. Yes, that looks a lot better. Still got lots of issues here though with the black clipping, almost it looks like. Another reason why it might be looking strange is because we unwrapped our object before we applied the shrink wrap. So I'm going to unwrap it again. I'm actually going to duplicate our model and unwrap it with the modifiers already applied. Highlight everything, unwrap, and it is a lot different now. It's not a square because we've got a lot of different shapes going on now. Okay, so I'm going to bake again, and I'm going to up the ray count to ray distance to 0.1. And bake. So if we wanted to, that's it, we could leave this, put this in our game engine, and it would look great. But I'd like to go a little bit further, fix these errors here, which will be simple enough. So I'm going to export this into Substance Painter, where we can do a little bit of cleaning up and hopefully convert this to a PBR shaded model. I've imported my model into Substance Painter now, Now I need to import our original scan so that we can bake some normal data and ambient occlusion to help us delight. So I'm going to bake that at 8K. Not going to worry about the thickness or ID, but everything else will be helpful. I need to do some basic delighting around the lip of the lid of the junction box. So I'm going to do that by filling it with the ambient occlusion that I just generated. I'm going to generate this, to duplicate this, add a levels, and then add a mask with a fill, and use that same ambient occlusion as a fill for our mask. We might need to invert this. And there we go, we are just affecting all the dark patches here. So we can slide this to see if we can get some uniform out of this. And if we just preview that, it definitely does have a delighting effect. And in our mask here, we could add generators, we can do a number of different things. But in this case, I'm going to fix the different lighting on the lid now. And I'm going to do that just the same way. So I'm going to call this base. I'm going to call this delight, main delight. Duplicate that and call it lid delight. Now we can simply change the mask. In this case, I'm going to paint a quick mask. So I'm going to remove that, add a paint, probably remove the, oh no, that's fine, paint a mask onto that. So and with that, we can change the levels. So instead of brightening it, we can darken it. And that already looks a lot more even. I've added a roughness channel now, so everything that is black is shiny, and everything that is white is rough. However, we still don't have a metal, and there are some things on this that I'd like to be metal, like this shiny metal lock here, which is going to be fairly simple. Going to add a new paint layer, or fill with just metal selected, and white is metal and black is not metal. So I'm going to set this to black, add a new paint layer, set that to metal, and just paint some white here. I'm going to use a fairly hard brush, maybe a brush with some scratches or metal fibers. How about this dirt brushed here? Very, very small, just to get this bit. I'm going to go directly into the metal channel. Make sure we're on white. Might need actually a paint layer. There we go. Just see if that works on here. Yeah, okay. We can just delete this one then. Perfect. And to roughen this up, I'm going to multiply that with a grunge map. And we're going to use metal scratches possibly, or rust. And put that in triplanar. Have a look at it. Metallic, multiply. Let's see if we can up the contrast a little bit. There we go. It's just a little bit shiny now. And I don't think we should add anything else metallic, because it's painted. Let's have a look actually to see what happens if we add just a base metallic fill to everything with just a very small amount. Just by using the clone stamp tool, I've created a cleaned up version without the graffiti, so we can put our own graffiti on. Let's have a look at how we can change that now from our original. It's fairly simple. We just need to drag in our new one and call it JBox as a texture into our project. We then just need to replace all the instances where we have it filled. So if we turn off everything so far, we've got the D light, we need to replace that. We've got the lid D light, we should really replace that, even though it won't make much of a difference because we're on the lid. Do it anyway. We have this cleanup on the paint, so don't need that because it's on the pass-through. Don't need this anymore. That was our original attempt at the D-light. Our rough base. Now that was just a color corrected version of our original color, so replace that. This is our rough mixed with our AO. We don't need to worry about that. We need to replace the rough with drips. There we go. There's even more drips that we added with the paintbrush. Don't need to change the metallic because that is just a rust map. So now we have a cleaned up version. We can now put in our own graffiti if we wanted to. Substance Painter has a really good preset for adding graffiti. It's called Spray Tag or Spray Paint. Which we can add as a decal onto our object somewhere. We need to rotate it into the right position, so 90 degrees. I'm going to make it a bit bigger. Change the color to let's change the color to white, for example. So we can bring this below everything else, or just, yeah, below everything else. So that our roughness still has an effect on it. So I'm going to add it here, rotate it so it's not perfectly centered, scale it up a little bit bigger, and now we can add an image that we want to be graffitied. So I'm going to add the river logo. Scale it up a little bit. And I'm going to play with some of the attributes so we can add some drips and leaks. So we'll need to adjust this so it's perfectly where gravity sits, so the leaks go down. And then we can just change the image rotation here. So something like that will work. Don't like this leak here. To change the density. And here it is. We've got a finished model we can put into a game engine or into any scene. If you have any questions about the technique or the workflow, make sure to let me know, and thank you for watching.